Hi everyone, as it's Thanksgiving, we're celebrating with our families too, and so there's no new class this week. However, we've pulled one from the archives that's particularly relevant to this time of year, and it is getting ready for your performance review. And many people are going to have performance reviews from now leading up to the end of January probably, and there's a lot you can do to help yourself get ready, to have all the information you need, and to also help your manager get ready. And if you do all those three things, you probably get an extra 10% on your performance review, at least, just because you made an effort beforehand rather than in the hour before your performance review. So we hope you find this useful, and we'll be back next week.
Welcome to the Manager Tools Members Only podcast for July, late July, 2006. Hello, everyone. This is Michael Ozan, your tardy host for our July Members Only podcast. Today, Mark Horstman and I have something special planned for you. Now, we spent a lot of time at the end of last year talking about how to write someone else's review. Now the question is, what should you do to prepare for your own review? Think of it this way. Suppose you had 3 folks working for you, and one of the 3 spent a couple of hours over the previous months preparing for their time with you. They had reviewed the entire year, prepared better information for you for their review, and taken their time writing their self-evaluation, including specific data to support their points. Now, wouldn't that be impressive? If there were a close call to be made, might it go in their direction? Well, in this cast, part 1 of a 2-part series, we walk you through everything you need to prepare for your review with your boss. And if you think it's too early, think again. Our process timeline is 3 months. And by the way, during the show, we promised a couple of things. You'll find all of these in the members section of the Manager Tools website. 1, a complete transcript of the entire show. 2, a PowerPoint presentation in PDF form with a detailed outline of the review preparation process. And 3, a detailed note-taking form to guide you through the entire process. Folks, no note-taking required this time. We've done all the work for you. As we discussed on discussion boards, these are examples of what you'll get with our premium membership program, which will be announced very shortly. So, now that you've downloaded all the materials and have them printed, let's get going. Hey, Mark, we got a lot of traction from our forecast last year on how to prepare for annual reviews. People really dug those. And I think folks really appreciated the detail, the step-by-step that we typically go through. I think that's often what is missing when you look at all the other kind of management advice that's out there. The other interesting thing that it was the first cast we ever did that was timed to a specific time or a specific event, given that companies mistakenly do annual reviews around the calendar year.
Thank you for saying mistakenly. I think we actually have to do a cast about the system of how to do annual reviews in a company. Not really addressing HR people, but we tend to stay away from making your company better through systems and policies. But the annual review one is a great one to teach people how to do it, how to do reviews on a year-round basis.
We talked about preparing for annual reviews that they're given, but what we didn't talk about, which is to some people even more important, which is how do they get ready for their own reviews. And luckily for them, they only need 3 months to get ready. So why are we doing this cast in July?
It's funny when you're talking about how much people enjoyed the detail. It's funny because we did 4 casts last year, and we were worried about that. We had, will this really grab people's attention? And of course it did. But I always worry about that because when I laid this out for coaching clients, I remember they would say, "Gosh, it seems like so much stuff." But there are a bunch of reasons, and when you hear them, I think there are people out there who go, "Oh my gosh, he's right. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of that." So let's go through them. I think there's like 6 of them or something. First of all, the reason you start now in July or early August is a reminder. if listeners haven't been doing their team's quarterly reviews, because remember one of the things we talked about in annual reviews is that you would start doing the reviews of your folks each quarter, give them a mini review, so you reduce the chances of a surprise at the end of the year. If you haven't been doing that, think about this. If you're not doing that, what are the chances that your boss is doing that? And if your boss is not, ask yourself, how much have you been thinking about writing the reviews of your folks in the middle of the year? And that's probably even less than your boss is thinking about about what he's going to do about writing your review in the middle of the year. And so what that means is you need to be scheduling those the end of third quarter, Q3 reviews, mini reviews with your folks now. Get them on the calendar, so that at the end of the year, you're going to be, you'll at least have one underneath your belt, and it won't be reinventing the wheel all over again, the way everybody seems to do annual reviews every year. So that's one thing. Second is, look, we know how busy everybody is. They'll hear the cast, they'll think about it a little bit, they say, wow, this is great, hopefully, and they'll put it off. Or maybe they'll schedule something for August. Then things are going to get busy for whatever reason. It'll go on a back burner for a couple of weeks, and suddenly they're starting in September. No offense, but that's probably what you and I would do. It just you look at, right, at developing, at spending some time on yourself, and you put that on the back burner so often. We're not trying to be rude here and suggest that they're not following the exact manager Jules way. The fact is, life is what happens to you while you're busy making plans, right? So if they start in September, 3 months is December. And something else to think about, you'll want to be done preparing for your own review before you have to start working on your team's review. So hopefully you want to be done in early December. Now look, if they get right on it right now, they'll probably finish early. And that's fine. You can just put the file aside that you develop, give it a 1-hour overview and some polishing at the start of December. And then you can go shopping for Christmas and have a little easier conscience, and you'll feel that much more ready, having gone through the preparation on yourself, that much more ready in terms of delivering your own folks their reviews.
Yeah, can you imagine going into a Christmas vacation, having done all this and being ready for the end of the year reviews?
Oh yeah, imagine it, even slightly better, which probably people think I'm terrible for saying. Imagine going on Christmas vacation, having it done, and telling people, "Oh no, I'm already done."
That's a little of the dark mark coming out there.
Just poke them with a stick as you walk out the door with a smile on your face, saying, "Yeah, I'm not worried about that." Okay, another thing. Third, every quarter you're supposed to be spending maybe 30 minutes keeping your resume current, right? That's what we suggest in our resume cast. Only probably a lot of them haven't been doing that either. This gives you some encouragement to schedule that now. And it's not hard to schedule it because it's only time at your desk alone reviewing stuff. It gives you time to schedule that now to catch up on the first half of the year. At this stage, it doesn't have to be exhaustive because the process is going to unearth a great deal, will help you think more clearly about your end of year review. But you ought to start. And we have a little hint. Those of you who stay with us until the very end of this cast will get a little bonus idea about resumes and reviews that's worth staying for. Fourth. There are actually 6 of these. Because as you do this, you may be disappointed in how you're doing this year, and starting in the middle of the year gives you a fighting chance to do something about it. I can't tell you how many people go, when I tell them in November, hey, you really need to, I thought everybody did this, sorry, and gosh, you need to get busy on this, and they realize, I know the 2 or 3 top things are going to be a problem for me, and it kind of is disheartening, right? It's almost like a punch in the gut before you start.
All right. Well, you're right. I think it's kind of like a marathon. I think if you're an effective marathon runner, competitive, you don't start thinking about your time, with a half mile left to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And you know what? If you do spread it out, if you give yourself a half an hour, what we're talking about is half an hour a week here, it becomes painless. It becomes part of the routine, the boring, the unsexy, unpretty part of management. And at the end of the year, when everybody else is pulling out their hair at a time when they're going through Christmas, for so many of us, you don't have to worry about that. In fact, I don't really talk about this as much, but one of the great things about that would be if everybody else is so busy, you're probably going to have some free time. Ask yourself what you really want to be doing and want to be known for next year. Spend more time in December when you would be writing everybody else's review and worrying about your own. Spend more time thinking about what you're going to do next year in terms of self-development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
And having done this 1 year, doing this the subsequent year is a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. I would even argue that if it takes you 3 months to do it this year, it'll take you 6 weeks the next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's something else.
So
too,
that's your seventh. That's your seventh reason. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Nice. Fifth, if for some reason the cache on your server won't hold a year's worth of you and your bosses and your team's emails because the IT people want to keep their servers neat and clean and pretty, and they limit you to a gig PST file or whatever, now is the time to beg for more, to burn your PST or all those emails to a disk in some fashion so that you have it to look at some point later. I've been burned by that before. Oh no, we only cached 3 months worth of emails. Okay? And then lastly, because this is our first members cast of year 2 of Manager Tools, and we're actually kicking off a series. So the timing is kind of a little bit in advance, but still valuable, because our monthly members casts this year, in year 2, I guess from June to June or July to July, however you want to look at it, will have a bias towards career and self-management. Topics like preparing yourself for a layoff, how to get ready if your company is being acquired, considering an MBA, how to start a new job, those kinds of things. They're absolutely managerial in nature, but many of them apply to anyone, whether you're a manager or not. So this is just a way for us to start with a really interesting cast that I think a lot of people will like, and it's really more of a self-development, which is an important professional part of being a manager, no question about it. And then I would just say one more comment about time, Mike, and that's could you, if you had to, do all this in one day? You almost could. It wouldn't be very good, but you almost could, because we're talking about, if you spread this out a half an hour a week over 3 months, is just 6 hours. The problem with that thinking is that if you go through this, you discover you need stuff to help you put your review together, whether it's looking at emails or looking at documents or whatever. And it happens every year. If you wait too long and you panic a little, what ends up happening is you rush writing your own review, which just seems to me galactically stupid. I mean,
galactically.
Right.
Is that a word?
I don't know. I think spell-check flagged it.
I think it's fairly accurate.
Yeah, it's not quite universally stupid, but it is galactically stupid. So
okay, well, those are great reasons. When I asked the question, I thought maybe I'd get one or two, but now we have
I'm just
7.
I'm just
since
full
I
of
get
it this
that.
month. Yeah.
You're full this morning. That's what you get for staying up till 4:30 in the morning writing show notes. So, and that's true, folks. and I got lucky after we got done our work in the evening. I think I got to go to bed at 3:30. So.
Yes, that's the lovely part about us having our own jobs.
I love podcasting.
Right.
Okay, so those are all great reasons. So let's get with it.
Okay. Let's remember the process takes 3 months. Is that we only have you spending 30 minutes a week on it. If you spread that over 220 work days in the course of a year, that's less than 3% of your year evaluating your performance. And something else too, Mike, we're suggesting that you schedule this time while you're at work. There are 2 reasons for that. I've really come to learn that managers who take homework home always tend to give that part of their homework, whatever goes home in their briefcase or in their satchel or what have you, their backpack, tends to get a very low priority to work on while they're at home. That's one thing if we're talking about external interviews. But career management within your firm you're already at just seems to get pretty low status. There's no deadline driving it. There's no boss yelling for it. And frankly, I'm fine with that because if you're marginally efficient, everybody listening has 30 minutes at their desk every week to give to this project. There's nobody who's listening. I challenge you to tell me. I guarantee I can find a half an hour in your calendar once a week to do this. And really, to be fair, this is the idea of doing this on your own time at home at night is just one more thing to take away time from what's more important than work, and that's your family. So your spouses will thank us if you spend a half an hour with your feet up on your desk at 5:30 or 6 o'clock one evening doing this. It probably will run longer than a half an hour, though, because we all know how terribly inefficient managers are from 5 o'clock on, but that's still okay. Just get home when you need to get home. Okay, so with those comments in mind, we have a week-by-week planning calendar we're going to walk through. We're not saying any of the weeks or the weekly dates are sacred. You'll find that it generally is best to go in this order, but it's it's not a really hard and fast rule. It's important probably to get weeks one and two done before you do anything else. But if you finish week 4 early and you want to head right into step 5, go for it. That's no problem. If you get behind and it's been 9 weeks and you're only on week 5, that's okay too. We're just trying to give you a numerical system in terms of a rank ordering of what order to do them in. As long as you figure out how to make up the time when you're 4 weeks behind. I will say that some managers have told me that they started right in on going to email when they learned the way to prepare everybody else's reviews, and that included mining email, which is a really powerful part of our process. They would immediately said, "Okay, let me just start going through emails real quick." I think that's step 10 or something like that, and that's not a good plan. Moving that all the way up to week 1 or week 2. If you swap any couple of weeks adjacent tasks, that's fine, but moving a week 10 up to week 1 is not that smart. You're going to be much more efficient and effective in looking at email the way we suggested if you've done the other work beforehand. And then before we go into the week-by-week review, one final kind of thought. Several of the steps that we're talking about here sound alike. They'll be much more effective in a large company. We're not in any way trying to slight the small company members we have out there at all. Okay, maybe in your small company you don't have job descriptions yet. Okay,
many of them don't even have reviews.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. But surely you won't argue. They won't argue with us. This is a good cast topic. And even if you think about it, it wouldn't hurt for you to prepare an end-of-year overview for your boss, even if you don't get a review. It may affect salary administration, even if there's no formal review process. And
absolutely. If there's a review, it just may not be written.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, we ought to use that as one of the distinctions between big and small company. If somebody says they're in a small company, we ask them, okay, is your review written or unwritten? If they say it's written, I say, well, maybe you're a medium-sized company. You're not a small company anymore. But look, even if you don't have a job description, which is pretty standard in smaller companies, Manager Tools doesn't have any job descriptions. You do all that magic technical wizardry, and I talk about stuff.
And you just talk.
Yeah, just blah, blah, blah. But look, week 2, we have a workaround for job descriptions, right? I mean, here are the questions to ask yourself to create your own job description to make sure you're on the right track. And virtually every other week we have in here has validity for a small company or even a startup. So I wanted to say that because as I was reading my own notes, my handwritten notes from years ago, I thought, there's a big company feel to this. And yet I think if small company people approach this I think this is a great self-management tool, even if we don't have reviews, I encourage them to stick with this because this is, if you get this done now, if you get it down now at a small company, when you are a bigger company or when you join a bigger company, when you become executive vice president for marketing or something like that, or for technical services or customer services, you're going to have it down, and you won't need to be worried about making the transition to a big company. You'll know how professionals go about preparing for their annual review, period.
Yeah. Hey, one side comment. It's completely a little bit off topic here, but people in small companies shouldn't shortchange the value of a job description. Matter of fact, I spent, part of why we were up till 3 o'clock in the morning last night is we were talking about we don't have job descriptions, and we discovered that there was a particular task or responsibility that we both thought the other person was really responsible for.
Yep.
And it turns out that it was smack dab in the middle between your skill set and my skill set, and we both have responsibilities around that, but we had both pretty much deferred that particular task to the other.
In fact, I would argue, Mark, that one of the things that makes small companies great, and certainly in our case, the whole trust thing, I trust you to do that, you trust me to do that, in fact, becomes a potential weakness in that trust makes me feel comfortable not even thinking about this thing. And at the same time, you're thinking, I don't even need to think about that. He's got it. And that ball is absolutely on the floor.
Right.
Yeah. Because of what we consider to be a strength about our organization, which is trust.
Right. Well, there you go. So even we could use some better job descriptions. Maybe we'll put that on our list of things to do here.
Yes.
All right. So let's get on. So step by step, what are the tasks involved here over this 3 month period?
Let me just do the real quick high level overview that everybody seems to love, and I quite frankly it helps me as well. Week 1, you're going to review last year's review. Week 2, you're going to look at your job description. Week 3, you're going to look at your resume. Week 4, you're going to look at your notes from your boss's one-on-ones with you. Week 5, you're going to look at all your one-on-ones for your team. Hopefully this is not a reminder you should be doing one-on-ones. Those should already be happening. Those are the core bedrock principle of manager tools managers. Week 6, you're going to look at all the reports that you and your team prepare and send forth about your organization. Week 7, you're going to do something really creative that was suggested to me a couple of years ago. You're going to look at documents that you've created in the past year. In weeks 8, 9, and 10, the lovely weeks where you get to look at emails, which takes a little while. And then weeks 11 and 12, you're going to write and prepare the review. And actually, it's going to be a review packet. Okay? So that's it, high level. Okay. Let's talk about each one in detail.
Cool.
Last year's review. Now, look, this is, probably the silliest thing in the world, but far too many managers I know that I've coached go into their annual review without even looking at last year's review. Okay? Yeah. This is bad. Look, this is bad if you have the same manager. God, well, why wouldn't you want to refresh your memory of what she said and the tone she took and what themes there were that you didn't expect? Or if you have a different manager, what do you want them to know that maybe you need to review from the previous year to carry forward? What that might they be thinking about because they've looked at it that you've completely forgotten and they feel like they need to provide continuity between last year and this year. And that's what I would do if I was your new boss. I look at last year's review. You don't want to be blindsided because you didn't spend a little bit of time. Shoot, a half an hour looking at your review. Okay, so look, in week 1, you're going to go over your last year's review. And the purpose of this half hour is to take notes for the rest of the process. In fact, Mike, I would argue that really what we're doing in the first 10 weeks of this is preparing the raw material so that you'll be totally comfortable writing your review.
There you go again with creating those piles of stuff again.
Yeah. It's a valuable pile, but honest, it's a valuable pile.
Horseman's law number 9, create big piles.
Big piles, yeah. It's here in this pile on my desk somewhere. God, if you're saying that, we I guess sometime we have to do a podcast on desk management. Okay, so look, you're going to want to create a folder for this. Those of you who are getting things done, disciples, lucky you, you've got a label maker and it'll be nice and pretty. And we're going to make it even easier for you. On the website, we have a simple form for capturing your thoughts on each of the major tasks and forms of data you'll be looking at. When you combine that, Mike, with the slides that are going to be on the website in PDF form for this cast in terms of describing in detail what we're talking about here, and the transcripts, you put those together in that packet, and you put the note-taking form in there. I have to tell you, it's a pretty awesome package. It will make this as painless as we can possibly make it. We are not available to prepare your review for you. But to me, this is a reminder of the value of what a premium subscription will be, because that's the kind of stuff that will be out there for premium subscribers for both monthly casts and for obviously for weekly casts as well.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to make it a lot easier, I think.
It won't be turnkey, but boy, it sure make it simple. As simple as we possibly can. Okay, so in week 1, when we're looking at last year's review, there are like 4 things we want to be looking for as we go through the review. The first one is obviously accomplishments. What did you do well last year? Some of these projects that you were working on from last year, or some of the numbers may have carried over to this year. what we found is that last year, if you did really well on something and it made your review, it was interesting last year. This year, it's assumed you can keep up that low level of cost or that high level of sales or whatever. And so it becomes routine and you don't get credit for it twice. And so we kind of forget about it. It just becomes, well, that's just the way we do things here. But look, if you drove down costs last year and this year you kept them low, even if you didn't have a goal in that area this year, you've probably forgotten about it, and you need to remind yourself and put that down as potential fodder for how you write your review. Okay? The review helps you think about themes that may be secondary this year, but still have traction, and they were important somehow last year. Again, what did you do last year that carried over? Maybe a project was split between the 2 years. This review around your accomplishments will refresh your memory. And again, you're just taking notes. It's gonna inform everything you do for the rest of this 12-week process. Second thing you're going to look for is feedback. Look, if you have the same boss, you better refresh your memory on what she talked about last year.
That'd be smart.
Yeah. But I'm telling you, people are. I think I talked about this, Mike. I call it the Christmas rule, Horstman's Christmas rule, right? Which is, you ask people, boy, is Christmas important to you? Oh gosh, I love Christmas. I love seeing my kids open presents. For the many, many people in the world who celebrate Christmas, many managers who listen to us who celebrate Christmas, and I love it and it's great. And I ask them, well, okay, it's great. And is it stressful? Oh gosh, yeah. It's just I'm wiped out afterwards. And every year I want to cut back and make it simpler, but I never do. And we always end up doing too much. And I'm always tired of work. And then I've got reviews to do. I said, well, look, it's just the Christmas rule. Anything you do once a year that's really important to you is going to be terribly stressful because you don't get to practice it. Well, that's exactly what people do with reviews. They do it once a year. They don't practice. They don't think about it systemically. They don't make it routine and boring and predictable and unsexy and unpretty by doing this kind of stuff. And then you get stressed out about it. So you need to go back and review your review from last year and look for negative feedback, even on some of your accomplishments. So that if there's a potential for that to come back up this year, if you didn't address it specifically this year, you know how to combat it if, in fact, he or she writes about it. Look, you're
right, and you're doing this fairly early in the process. So, like we talked about earlier, if you found there's feedback that you haven't addressed and haven't done anything about, you have an opportunity to do something about it now versus, in early January, late January, when you usually start thinking about this stuff.
Yes, in fact, if you do this now, I guarantee you, within 2 or 3 weeks, your boss may come to you and say, "Man, you seem to be kind of re-energized." And privately, you're thinking, yeah, I don't want to read about this thing that I was really important in my development plan for next year that I haven't done anything on yet. I got to get to 2 conferences. I got to do this. I got to do this. Yeah, exactly. Of course, if you've worked with your admin real well, your admin right after your review, we didn't talk about this in the review process, but when you come out of your review, you should be scheduling an hour with your admin and say, look, each quarter or each month, you should be asking me where I've gotten on these 7, 8, 9, 10 things that came out of my review, so that I don't wait until September to try to cram everything in.
Good point.
Yeah. You'll also want to look for comments in any of the numerical rankings on your review. People miss this. People they tend to focus on salary and 1 or 2 key areas, the major write-up, looking for the key buzzwords that a company considers important. When you or I in the Army, the big thing was the senior raters review, and what you were looking for is truly outstanding as opposed to just outstanding. That actual phrasing made you a top performer. It was that micromanaged, if you will, in the Army, which has, believe it or not, the military has the best way of handling reviews I've ever seen. So our focus is so much on 1 or 2 key areas, we forget to look for comments in numerical areas, additional comments below, supplementing the ranking of 1 through 5 or whatever scale is used. And you want to look at those and you want to think about those versus this year, because you can bet your boss, if he or she's reasonably professional, is going to look at this and they're going to think, okay, how did Mark do on these things that I mentioned to him last year, or that a previous boss mentioned to him last year. Look for any suggestions in improvements in the characteristics, not just a ding maybe, but hey, I'd like you to do more of this next year. And then you subtly start introducing those evidence of that change in August, September, October. You're going to look good at the end of the year. And again, make it easy. Give yourself a weekly reminder. Hey, you need to be working on presentation skills. You need to get your agendas out earlier. If you do a Control-Shift-K weekly agenda reminder, it's much more likely that it's going to be a relatively painless improvement process for you over the remainder of the year, and it'll be easier for your boss to say, "Wow, I've really noticed a difference in terms of you getting on that. Thank you for doing that." And a lot of times, the question about whether or not you get a top ranking or a good ranking is, hey, he could be in the top, but maybe not. I don't know exactly where he should be. I want to look at everybody else on my team. But then they start looking down at the details, and in every one of the detail areas, you're hitting home runs or they're noticing a significant change. That can be the thing that makes a difference. Maybe not hitting a home run in the top area, you can still end up getting a top review.
Yeah. What about objectives?
Okay, good. Look, it may be that your company separates this process of creating performance objectives, goals, and so on, or development objectives from last year's review, but many don't. And our point is we don't think of it that way. If you do separate them, consider the two documents as one for the purpose of this process we're talking about. You need to write down in the note-taking form everything you committed to doing in December or January of last year, January of this year.
Good to know.
Yeah, if you're worried about where you are, it's better to know it now than to remind yourself, oops, the Thanksgiving oops, right? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I better pretend like I've done something in that area. So you want to be able to do that and then check them off, obviously, if you can, or make notes of the ones you've already got done. That's good. And lastly, number 4, boss's issues. Now, as you have some distance to the review, which you didn't at the time you were getting it, you're probably just nervously looking for the percentage salary improvement you were going to get in many cases. Now, after knowing your boss a little bit better, you may see a pattern or a theme or a tone in your boss's review from last year. Make a note of it. Think about how it will affect the objectives he or she gave you for this year, whether you're going to achieve them or not. If you're going to not achieve an objective in an area that seemed to be thematically important for him last year, ask yourself what you can do to get ahead or at least get close to achieving it in the last 6 months of the year. There's no need to solve the problem, if it is a problem, and I'm not saying it is, now, but it'll be easier to think about doing so in 10 weeks if you start thinking about them right away.
Yeah. Now, well, I think the key here is to put yourself in your boss's head for a little bit, because you know your view of what's important and his or her view as to what's important may be different. And last year's review is going to give you good hints as to where he or she places their priorities when it comes down to doing the review. And in my experience, sometimes the review is not reflective of what they're telling you during the course of the year. So,
yep, perfect. Now, look, what we've just talked about, it sort of implies that there's a benefit to thinking about what your boss did last year. But even if your boss is different, Mike, it's still worthwhile to go through these steps. And if you have a different boss and you don't have their comments on your review, that's fine. Go talk to former directs of your boss. If he or she was in your company at the time, see what they say about their reviews. Look for any themes that were there. If you were asking me, if Mike, if I worked for you and then you left and went somewhere else, and somebody said, "Hey, what's Ozan like when he does reviews?" I'd be happy to give you my review. I'd probably tear off the page about salary increase, but I'd give it to you. A lot of people wouldn't do that, but I don't care. It's just a way to make things easier. One more thing, Mike. It probably seems silly to say this out loud, and I probably said this several times during the cast, but just because your firm or your organization, your company changed the process or the forms they use to do the reviews, this accomplishment, feedback, objective, and boss's issues are still damn important. Okay? Just because the review process changed or the form changed doesn't change this process you're going through. In fact, it'll make you much more likely. Hopefully they've already released him, but even if they haven't, probably they're delaying until the last minute because that's the way things are sometimes. That's okay. Preparing as if you're going to have the old form is fine. You'll be the most ready person to take the new form and write your review on it really, really quickly. In fact, I would argue that if you do it well, your boss is going to say, "Oh, this will give me some sense of what I'm going to be thinking about when I write everybody else's reviews." So that'll stand you in good stead.
So we're on to week 2,
Yep.
Which is the job description.
Yeah. So in week 2, Mike, you're going to make notes based on your job description. And again, we've got a place for that on the form. There are 3 good reasons to do this. first, it obviously just pays to be thorough. It's technically the baseline for what your job is. And if you don't know what the baseline is and your boss covers it in your review, you're going to feel stupid, and rightfully so. Okay. Second, and this is sneaky, the company often provides your job description in a packet with the review they give to your boss. Now, maybe you'd probably know that, but some managers forget, or if you're not a manager, you don't know that. And it's good to know. It's good to have reviewed something your boss will be reviewing before she writes your review.
Yeah, it's good to know what they're thinking about when they're writing it.
Yeah, that's
a little useful.
Part of the point of this, right? And then finally, if it's wrong, you're going to want to change it or make some suggestions about how it can be improved. Okay, so what do you do with it? Really, there are just a couple of things to do with your job description, and that is, number one, you want to look at key deliverables and metrics. You want to look for what the job description says you're supposed to be doing and make notes on all of that. Sometimes it's close, it's not exactly right, and you're going to need to know how what you're doing now or what you've been doing throughout the year connects to this when you write or get your review. If it's not close, you may want to make notes for starting to change it, even though changing your job description is probably, that's a whole nother cast. I wouldn't say to my boss, if I got a bad review, part of the reason for this is a really bad job description. You should be making the case for how to subtly change it without formally changing the form in your end of year review by saying, hey, the job description says X, but I hope you see where I've been working on X prime, which is really what the job description would imply based on the changes in responsibilities and roles around here in the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, if you're doing this if you're in fact doing this as we suggest in, week 2 of this 3-month process, you have plenty of time to go back and get your job description changed. These things are not immutable.
Right.
They can change.
Yeah, and a lot of people think, they are immutable, and some person who is responsible for job descriptions has to approve everything. Not so much. HR would say, wow, really? You have time to do a job description? Wow, that's cool. You want to serve on an HR committee? No. Thank you, no.
Not really.
Okay, the second thing you want to do is you want to, as a thought exercise, and this is what you make notes on, you're going to create your job description, prepare your own job description using that creating a job description idea we gave you in the review cast last year. And there were actually 5 questions we asked you to ask yourself. We'll repeat them here, and they're on the form, by the way, that we're going to prepare for you. The reason the company created this job is number 1. Number 2, the most important ways a person doing this job should spend their time are. Number 3, the 2 to 3 most important duties of this job are. Number 4, what this job takes to be successful is. And number 5, the simplest, easy way to see if this job is being done well is. And that just gives you a different way of thinking about your job, a little bit more analytically, a little bit more one step removed, rather than thinking about yourself and what you've done, thinking about the job without you in it in an abstract form. And it helps you get you thinking big picture about your role and contributions relative to that more abstract job description. You may find that you're a little bit off in terms of where you've been directing your time, and you may need to re-engage on some things that maybe have fallen by the wayside if your boss is going to use your job description, which it's possible he or she is.
Yeah, well, if you ask these questions, it's going to re-engage your brain, whereas if you're reading that kind of crusty old job description on your formal job description, your brain's probably going into autopilot at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, you start reading it, and your autopilot's a good way to describe it. You just kind of, okay, I've seen this before. It's been a while, but I've seen it before.
Yeah, it's like driving to work and getting done with your hour commute and having no earthly idea how you got there.
Yeah. Well, your brain is supposed to do that for you. Your brain is saying, okay, I know how to do this. You don't have to think about it. I'll take over. It's like getting dressed in the morning. You know how to do it. You don't even think about getting dressed. It just happens. You don't think about, if you have to think about tying your shoes, you go step by step. It'll take you a lot longer than if you just let your fingers do it automatically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And thinking about your job description before you get reviewed on it is not a good place to be on autopilot.
Yes.
So, all right.
Okay.
Week 3, the resume.
Yeah, it's an easy week. This is an easy week, Mike, if you've been doing your resume work throughout the year. And we just know that everybody has. They've been.
All listeners, I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm
yeah,
positive.
absolutely.
I'd be very surprised if they weren't.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how many resumes. I got 2 this week from people I know saying, hey, would you please look at these? I need to update them. And the last job always looks like crap. Sorry. So look, all you have to do here, though, is capture key accomplishments that you put down on your resume. You put it on paper other than your resume so you can get it off your resume. Basically, you put it on your note-taking form. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just most managers think differently about what they'd talk to other companies about versus what they'd pitch for a good review. People tend to winnow out or weed out things that might go on their resume. So the resume is just kind of a place to start, but that's fine. We're just gathering data right now. Now, look, if you haven't been doing that, it means you've got to really, we recommend that you wait to do this until after you've gone through this process and mined all the data that you're going to be able to look at in order to bring your resume current. But this
would you recommend them leaving this resume on their desk for the next few weeks?
Absolutely.
Would that be a good idea?
Feel totally comfortable. Corporate America, worldwide, it's okay. Leave your resume right in your desk. It won't bother your boss when she walks.
Yeah, make sure you turn it so that people walking in the door don't have to read it upside down.
Yeah,
be very
make sure it's
inconsiderate.
very obvious. It's a resume. It's one page. Good plan. Gosh, you know what? In a few years, leaving your resume on your desk will be okay. And we talked about that actually, that it's still not appropriate. But the way we see resumes is just a way to capture your performance. Maybe what we should tell people is, hey, feel free to leave your resume on your desk at any time. And when your boss says, "What the heck is your resume doing on your desk?" you can say, "Oh, I'm just preparing for my end of year review."
There you go.
That's the Manager Tools answer. Okay, so that's week 3, doing your resume. If you've already been doing it, it's easy to capture that stuff that you've been adding for the course of the year for your present job. If, in fact, you haven't been doing it, then you get a pass for this, and you have to redo that at the end of the year.
Okay. Week 4, boss one-on-ones, which I'm sure everybody's fortunate enough to have a boss that's doing one-on-ones with them.
We actually had a spate there for a while in the discussion forums, Mike, where people were saying, "Mark, please tell me how to get my entire organization to do this." And hopefully one of the themes that came through over and over again was that, look, you really can't make your company do this stuff just because all of a sudden you've discovered the right way to manage. No offense, but it's just the best way to influence up is to use these things, quietly go about doing your job way better, and to have people say, "What changed you?" And say, "Well, actually, I do these one-on-ones and coaching and feedback, and I've learned how to present and so on. I use Manager Tools, and I'd suggest you try it and see if it works for you." And, you start getting promoted. One way to influence up the organization is to get promoted a couple of times by doing your job better.
And this stuff is not all theoretical, right? This we talk about this stuff because it works.
Yeah, people have gotten promotions because
works.
they write us and tell us that Manager Tools helped them get the promotion.
And it's effective. So given that it works and it is effective, if you do it properly, people will notice.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. We've, like you just said, we've had several listeners call us, write us, and tell us that they got promoted as a result of doing this stuff. That their bosses noticed. Their subordinates said, "Man, last couple of months you've just been
good.
an incredibly more effective manager. How is that?" Well, this stuff works. So, anyways, off the soapbox.
It's exciting. I'm thrilled that people are using this stuff in the way we intended, which is use this stuff and be more effective because of it. And if you get promoted, send us a part of your promotion increase.
There you go. Who said we don't have a revenue model? Okay, so week 4, boss one-on-ones. That's assuming that you're lucky enough to have a boss that does one-on-ones with you, right?
Yep, that'd be good. We're going to look for 2 things, and we're going to make notes on 2 things from all of your paper one-on-one forms. And by the way, this is a reminder, Mike, I think. Now, I'm sure there are people who'll tell me, "No, Mark, it's much easier doing the technology, using a tablet PC or typing them up or whatever." But I really think that scanning them this way is easier on paper to go through what amounts to, 20 weeks or 25 weeks of one-on-ones. If your boss does them weekly, I really think it's much easier to go over your notes from one-on-ones this way. If somebody has a different opinion, fine. But I think looking at them manually is much faster. You want to look for 2 things: accomplishments and issues. Accomplishments, just because, it's not as if your one-on-ones are nothing but your successes, but still, they're going to point you toward any projects you may have forgotten about, small wins you had along the way. And again, hopefully this will make you want to keep better notes, because there'll be a few things that remind you that, hey, and that brings up something else that I don't even have written down that we talked about. So always better to take good detailed notes in your one-on-one. And then secondly, issues. You want to look over 6 to 9 months of notes, and hopefully you're going to see themes in what your boss talks about. If there are themes, either about you or your team or your projects or your boss's pet peeves, expect to hear about them again at the end of your review. Take notes on them. Even if you can't combat them, Mike, if your boss says, I require everybody's desk to be spotless,
I'm in trouble there.
You can be thinking about how to address them and maybe re-engage on it with your team so that at least you're making strides in that direction, whereas all your other peers won't, they'll have forgotten about it, said, the boss isn't going to care about that. That's not that big a deal. Sometimes it's doing everything 1% better that gets you the top nod rather than hitting a home run in your top area.
Right.
And again, you want to be able to talk about all the things you've done well at the end of year.
Yep, and here's we've had many of our listeners ask about how do they get their boss to do one-on-ones, and of course, we've always said that you can't do that. You just focus on doing them.
It's just hard.
Be effective, and people will notice, and that's how you change things. But here's the downside, which is if they're doing one-on-ones, just like you're doing one-on-ones with your folks, they're going to have a written record of your performance and the goals and objectives and that coaching and all that over the course of the last year. And so it'd be a really good idea, given that they have that much more detailed information, that you review it and go through it and at least refresh yourself as to what you've committed to do.
I just thought about it, Mike, but insofar as these folks who are listening are doing one-on-ones with their teams, and they're probably thinking, I've got to keep good detailed notes, and if my team doesn't, that's okay. If they feel like it's their meeting and they need to take good notes, but they don't approach it that way with their boss, gosh, you're right. You just pointed out that maybe they've got pretty light notes, and their boss, as it relates to them and their team, their boss could have better notes and more data for the annual review than the manager does. So, yeah, good point.
All right, week 5, team one-on-ones. Now, how does that affect your own personal review?
Yeah, I hope this one is like so obvious. Remember, you're the manager of your team. You get credit for what your team does and what they don't do, obviously, but it's not just about you if you're a manager. It's also about everything your team did, because you're not supposed to only be reporting on what you personally did, but on what your team accomplished. And generally, you're going to make notes about 3 things: your direct successes, your direct failures, and, again, projects, just gathering data. In terms of successes, you're not just responsible for your team when they fail, you're just in terms of getting in trouble for them, but when they succeed. If someone on your team did well, that reflects, maybe only lightly, but that's okay, it reflects on you. Write it down. You may just be surprised at how much your team and you did at the end of the year, or in this middle of the year review. You also want to go over failures, things you talked about with your team, not because you want to bring them up in your review.
Hold on a second, Mark. Before you do that, let me go back to direct successes, because I think there's something worthy of note here. Is I think a lot of managers, there is such a overwhelming feeling sometimes about the individual who claims credit for their subordinate successes, and the feeling is that most people feel that is a bad thing to do. And
yes,
so when it comes down to reviews, though, I just caution people about going too far. You have an influence on your organization. If your subordinates are successful, then you are successful. And so during a review is not the time to slight that.
To be worried. In other words, it's not the time to be worried that you're going to be taking credit for somebody else's work. You're going to use the word we, perhaps, but you're not going to be stealing their thunder and presenting it as your own work. Yes, exactly right. Yeah. It's okay to talk about what your directs did, because you, in the same way that you roll up to your boss and he or she is going to be taking credit, not taking credit, but essentially getting rewarded for the fact that the organization did what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So good. I'm glad you said that, because you're right. That is a huge concern that people have among managers who are unethically, basically taking somebody's work and then positioning it as them and then calling it I.
Yeah, use we. But
good point.
The fact is, you are responsible and you deserve some of the credit for what your organization does. That's your role as a manager. So
good. Okay, directs failures as well. Maybe it shows up in your one-on-ones with your boss, but just in case, make notes about coaching and feedback that you've given your team about stuff they haven't done well. You want to be ready to talk about failures, so you want to have them in the back of your mind if your boss brings them up. And the key is, if you think about them now, you'll be able to talk to him or her about how you overcame or made up for them later in the year. That's another reason why we want to. There's value in starting this process early, as opposed to doing it in the "oops, it's Thanksgiving, I better write my review" mode.
Right.
And then lastly, projects. Bosses love asking about a project that was left dangling in May when it's December. Capture what your team has been working on, even if it doesn't seem to have been finished in some way, and either finish it or start thinking about what to do to overcome the fact that you won't have it done at the end of the year because it was canceled or it was put on hold or the customer put it on hold or whatever, rather than you kind of looking like a deer in the headlights and they say, well, gee, we did have 7 projects we're going to work on this year and 3 of them just seemed to die in May and June. Why is that? Well, there were good reasons for that. And if your boss thinks about it, now your boss has 10 people reporting to her. She can't know every single project and all the details. You need to be able to help her. So actually the customer put that on hold, and this one we lost funding because we had budget cuts in the second quarter. You need to be able to talk about those kind of things.
Let me add one under team one-on-ones, particularly under projects, is I'd encourage folks to think about development of their people as projects as well. And I know in my experience, nothing ever impressed me more than during review or preparation for review where somebody was sharing with me how they developed their people. So when you're reviewing team one-on-ones, that's the time to get that in your mind and make sure your boss is aware of what kind of personnel development stuff you're doing.
Perfect. Gosh, that's so perfect. I wish I'd have thought of it. Well said. Okay, week 6. It's time to look at reports. Look, lots of bosses keep report files from the directs. I do. You now know this, and so you should be able to find any operational, personnel, budgeting, or financial reports that reflect on you or your team for the year. Whatever goes up weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever. Do not underestimate this step just because it's right after one-on-ones and we're going to be talking about emails. Budgets alone can kill you. You need to be able to have a detailed discussion about your monthly budgeting and its effect on end-of-year costs and benefits and cost analysis and so on.
Right. It's not coincidental that sometimes reviews are happen at the same time where you're going through budgets. And so if you have a problem here, that problem is going to become very public at the same time people are thinking about your review. So pay attention.
Bingo. And look, you're often so far down in the weeds that you need to look at the reports in this way halfway through the year to see what the boss is seeing sort of systemically or systematically about you and your team. And if you're smart, you're going to get your hands on your peers' reports that are similar to yours so that you can compare. I mean, you may not know how much better or worse you're doing than anybody else, even though probably around the water cooler you get some sense of that. And if you don't know where they are, we have a little hint for you. Your boss's admin has all of them. And if you're really smart, next year you're going to keep all of your peers' reports that you normally throw away. And if you have an admin, you're going to hand them to him or her and say, look, keep a file on all my peers' monthly reports and keep a monthly file so we can look at all these reports when we get ready for the end-of-year review.
Oh, you're such a sneaky guy.
Yeah. It's almost as if all this stuff fits together, like we actually have been thinking about it and working with it for years and years and years.
Yeah. Nah, probably not.
I'm just thrilled to be able to share it to a wide audience. Cool. I think it's just great. Again, we are looking for successes and failures, where you met your goal and where you didn't. But we're not suggesting that it's only that. You want to be looking for how you're going to be communicating, how you're going to be talking about all this stuff in your review, and you're going to be writing some notes down so when it comes time to do it, you're going to be steeped in this stuff. But I will tell you this, Mike, and we're in week 6 now. A little caveat. At this point, many folks who are listening who are going to be doing this are going to be thinking about quitting the process. It'll be because you've got a mass of data in front of you telling you about a bunch of stuff you haven't done that you said you were going to do, and all the metrics that you've been letting yourself off the hook for throughout the year because things change and stuff moves too fast. And I can't believe that's still a priority, because now the boss is saying, I know that's a priority, but it doesn't matter. You got to get this done now. They want it next week. They want it Tuesday. You got to do an all-nighter to put this PowerPoint presentation together. And my thought on that is simply this. That was probably true last year too. You just didn't do a mid-year review or an August review of your work. It's better to know what you're weak on or where you're a little bit behind now than to have your boss tell you about it in December or in January. So it may be a little bit disheartening, but if this year is like any of the others, you're going to be let off the hook anyway at the end of the year. You want to be able to talk about what you were successful on, and if you don't go through this process, you won't be ready to do that.
And it's not the focus here. The huge advantage of this that we're really not going to get into in a lot of detail, this serves as the basis for improving your performance next year. But in the future. And
you could cheat a little bit and start now and improve, and sort of sweep up some loose ends before the end of the year this year as well. Yep. Okay, week 7. Documents created. I love this one. A friend of mine in sales showed me this. He had a new boss, and his boss spent the whole year asking him for new reports, written documentation, written training guides for new representatives that this friend of mine was training. He did this to show his boss that, yes, he had told him to do all this stuff, and here's the written proof. Salespeople and sales managers tend to have short memories when it comes to everything except clients. I didn't ask you to do that, did I? Yes, you did, and here's the document that I had to create late one night and over the weekend in order to train this rep so that we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel next year. And basically what it did was it got me to thinking about you can do this one of two ways: searching on your computer, and there's, you can use a search function. I happen to love Google Desktop, but you don't have to use that. You could simply, in Windows Explorer, you could organize a folder by date created, or do a search using Windows search function, which is horribly kludgy, but you could do it, and asking it for every document that was created in the calendar year thus far that you're doing. And you'll want to do this again toward the end of the year, although usually as you're going through this process, the stuff that happens along the way, you're going to be making notes on things that you're doing later on in the year that are actually they're current because you're working on them at the time. And I was amazed at stuff that I found on my computer when I did this a couple of times, all the stuff you've forgotten that you worked on. And you might want credit for some of it. And sometimes it doesn't make the one-on-one, it doesn't make anything else, and there's a document that you spent a weekend preparing, or a slideshow that you did for your boss while she was out on vacation or at a conference or whatever. It won't hurt you to print them out if you think it's necessary. Or you can just make some notes in the form that we provide about what successes they point to, or what work you did that was helpful to somebody else in terms of team building or supporting your boss or supporting an initiative in the corporation or what have you. A lot of times it ends up being stuff that's not related to the chain of command, but it's something that managers are expected to do, serving on committees, things like that.
Yep. And one additional point on the document stuff, just take the extra step. You deliver the document, but think the next step, which is what effect did it have on the organization? What were the results to the organization? You'll certainly want to be able to put it in that context versus I created a document.
Yeah, you're not saying I typed 55 pages for you. You're actually, you want to talk about value creation. Good, thank you, Mike. Yeah, that's good. Weeks 8 and 9, weeks 8, 9, and 10, we get to the fun one, which is emails. And to tell you the truth, even though this is probably the best repository of data and reminders of all kinds of stuff you've already forgotten, it'd probably get a little bit boring. But you're going to get some surprises. There's no question. If you go through a year's or 9 months worth of emails, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's right. That fire came up in February and it took me 3 weeks to fight that fire. I had completely forgotten about it because, of course, your memory is kind to you and it washes away the really, really bad things that have happened in your past. It buries them in your subconscious.
Well, I think most of our listeners probably agree. We try to help them get out of this, but a lot of your time as a manager is spent in firefighting mode. And those are things that are not reflected in your job description, in objectives. There's no other documentation of it other than email in general.
Yes,
given that you're spending a lot of your time doing it, you might as well cull it out and make sure you're getting credit for it.
And if you find 3 or 4 of these things that took a significant amount of your time, let that be a lesson to you next year. Is there a way to say no or be a little bit more proactive about those things? Maybe there's a theme associated with all the big fires, or and you can build in some proactivity, some managerial boring routineness, so that you reduce the number of fires you fight. Unfortunately, a lot of companies say, boy, that guy, Ozan, he's awesome. He's always just putting out fires left and right. He's a great manager. Whereas, Martin over here, she's great, but she doesn't seem to be as energetic or as excited about Ozan. Well, that's just because she does her job day after day, blocking and tackling, one-on-ones, coaching and feedback, and everything runs smooth in her shop. Nobody ever has to pay attention. It's just boring, and a lot of work gets done.
Yeah, and not to repeat myself 10,000 times, but this is the basis of future improvement. You go through this process, yes. You'll have a better review. You'll have done your own review, and you'll have a better sense of where you are, what you've done, your accomplishments, your weaknesses, and what you need to focus on next year than you would ever get from simply getting a review from your boss. No doubt about
Bingo. It. Okay. The way to do it is to sort your emails by person. It's important to do that by person in whatever folder you're looking at, and go through them chronologically from January or whatever your start of your review year is up until make them current. If you go through by date, there are too many. We find that there are too many threads to kind of keep track of, Mike. At least this has been my experience working with some managers that I've done this with. And you get going too fast, and you kind of forget to write down all the threads, and then you have to connect things later. You have to keep going back and looking at who the email was from. We find that if we do it by person chronologically, the threads appear a little bit more naturally. Now, I even take it a step further, and I make copies of all the mails that I've sent to folks that I'm searching on one at a time, and I put my mails to them in one folder, and since then I sort them by date within that person's folder, and that way I can follow the threads between me and them that I'm coming up with. Now look, you may choose to do it differently, but most managers I know do it one person at a time, rather focusing on, again, the chronology, just strictly a chronology, and putting everybody in the same box. Another thing it does, Mike, is it helps identify team member successes, and that's a chance for you to go back and write down in that portion of when we're talking about one-on-ones, write down the team member successes, and transfer them again to that point we talked about earlier. And then a little hint about one email is to don't forget to sort for peer emails, internal or external customer emails, and also projects. If you can identify projects in some fashion, the way you handle email, even better, so you can look for ups and downs in the projects along the way. Okay. Very powerful. You're going to see little things that you had forgotten along the way. Maybe only 1 or 2 that are going to be big enough to make it into the review that you're going to write, but at least you'll know completely. You'll have a complete picture of what you've done through the course of the year. Email is an absolutely great repository of all the stuff you've been working on throughout the year.
I could guarantee that if somebody did this, they would absolutely find at least half a dozen accomplishments that they would have otherwise completely forgot about.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. And they're probably thinking to themselves, well, they must not have been that important because they didn't think about them. Well, it depends. Are they important to you? Are they important to the boss? Could it be that 4 or 5 additional accomplishments make your boss realize, wow, you really had a great year? Yeah. You don't want to go in. It's like going in with a revolver that should have 6 bullets in it and you only have 3. Yeah, if you could have 6, wouldn't you want to have 6? Yes, you would.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay.
Weeks
11 and 12. Write and prepare your review packet. And now we're getting to the good part.
Yeah, the good part or the hard part. There's no easy way around the writing part. But imagine doing this step, Mike, if you haven't gone through the first 10 weeks that we've just walked everybody through.
No.
Right? And then I say, okay, wait, I'm betting, okay, we just said it's hard, but I'm still guessing that everybody's going to hold our feet to the fire and say, no, I want you to tell me, how do I write my own review, right? That's what people are really don't let yourself off the hook, Mike. Don't let yourself off the hook, Mark. Okay, tell us how to write the review.
It's easy.
Well, heck, it's easy. Just go back to last year's cast on how to write somebody else's review. You've got all the data you need. All you're doing is writing your own. It's not hard at all. Remember the SEER method: summary, example, elaboration, and then result, or the SumX method, which is summary and then example. Yeah, those are parts of writing the review that we shared with you last year in the 4-part review cast. All you need to do is review that, and you're in great shape.
Yeah, we'll be able to figure out how whether or not people are listening to this or not, because we'll see an uptick in the downloads of last year's shows.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Now, there is one caveat. I generally don't recommend, Mike, that you try to figure out what your core message is for your review. If you're thinking your boss may have one for you, certainly if she's a manager tools manager, by all means think about that and be ready to support or refute it if there's a concern for you. But I wouldn't try to write one unless, and the reason for that is you're probably not going to influence your boss's ability to come up with a core message unless you hit a home run with your number one most important project or metrics. In that case, fine. Talk about that. Make that a core message. Otherwise, write it without that. Allow all the data that you're going to deluge your boss with and the detail you're going to provide them, allow that to cause them to influence their message in a way that ends up being positive for you. Then, after you've written it, add any documentation that really stands out to you as an addendum. A couple extra documents, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 10 if you feel like they're that important, to make it easy for your boss to review it and not have to go find it, which he may not have spent the time doing. And if you've gotten done in time, hand it to your boss within 24 hours after you've heard that he or she has gotten a reminder to do all of their reviews, or just a reminder to do yours if they're scattered throughout the year. Imagine that. Hey, I heard that you're going to get ready to do my review. Here's my packet on the year. Watch your boss's mouth just fall open. Here's somebody who knows how to manage themselves. Here is a professional.
Right, and you're just taking 20 pounds off their shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to get the benefit of the doubt on every close call that's going to happen. You're going to have a significantly better review because you spent 6 hours on this over the course of 3 months.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Now, final point. We promised everybody a resume bonus at the end of this cast, Mike. And we may have already given this away. Now that you're done with your review, if you haven't done your little bit of work each quarter on your resume, now is the time. Take all of your notes about the entire year and that review you just wrote and update your resume in your most current job. Now, your resume is current.
Yeah.
And that may be a good thing if your review goes badly.
Way to end it, my friend.
No, I know that sounds terrible. No, that's just it's a little bonus. I know that people tend to push the stuff that for themselves. They tend to put that on the back burner. And this is a chance to make it easy. You've got all the data right in front of you. It'll take an extra half an hour. You'll be basking in the success of your boss going, wow, thanks a lot. And you'll make your resume look really, really good. And then you can not worry about it for a quarter until March of next year.
Yeah. Good. All right, man, this is fantastic stuff. We have a bunch of stuff we're going to put up on the website in terms of forms and transcripts and all that will make this very, very easy to, not easy to implement. It will you won't have to have taken a lot of notes during this podcast, and that's a good thing. Because there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it'll be turnkey. You'll take that form that we've got, and it'll remind you of the steps, and you've got the PowerPoint as well. No brainer.
Right, and of course you'll hold on to it till next year. You'll have gone through it once, and next year will be even easier.
Even easier. You'll start it in September, and it'll be smooth as silk. And people will say to you, "How do you do that?" Oh, manager tools.
And now we've got a process on how we're going to prepare for our reviews every year for the rest of our careers.
Yep.
There you go. Excellent. Thanks,
Mike.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. So, folks, that's it. Hope you enjoyed that, and even more, I hope you put it to good use. If you haven't been to discussion forums lately, I think you'll want to do so. www.manager-tools.com/forums. A lot of great stuff going on there, and as always, we appreciate everybody who's choosing to participate there. Lots of great information, and Mark and I are learning quite a bit from everybody. So, until next time, so long, folks.